Hello and welcome to the second episode of The Responsible Edge with me, Charlie Martin. The Responsible Edge is a weekly podcast dedicated to exploring responsible marketing themes. Each week, I'm delighted to be joined by a leading communications expert to uncover insights and strategies that foster ethical yet impactful marketing practices. So without further ado, I'm delighted today to be joined by Charlotte Saunders, the head of communications at Axter, a leading company in roofing and waterproofing systems. Since joining the company, Charlotte has played a key role in implementing marketing communications, change management, and culture transformation projects, leveraging her expertise to enhance both internal and external communication strategies for the company. Charlotte, it's brilliant to be joined by you today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So Charlotte, this week's theme we're going to be looking at is from an article, should I say, that was published last week in The Guardian, and covered, across lots of different media outlets, regarding Unilever, obviously big company, maker of Marmite, Domestos and Vaseline, being investigated by the UK's Competition and Markets Authority for possible green claim misrepresentations. Their inquiry is focusing on Unilever's use of broad environmental claims, unclear recyclability statements, and their use of natural imagery and colouring, potentially constituting greenwashing. So, Charlotte, I know you've had a chance to have a look at this. As somebody with your degree of experience in marketing, what was your broad take on the news that Unilever was being investigated?
Well, I think it's good that we've got the CMA doing this work and investigating companies who are making claims, because it's very confusing for consumers to be bombarded with information and not knowing what's actually truthful. It's a shame, obviously, because if it does whatever they discover is actually not correct or is misleading, then it's a shame, because ultimately we want to live in a world where we're being fed the truth, and that's not always the case. But I think the vague claims, it's not specifically clear on what those vague claims are, but that is a big problem in the greenwashing side of things, because for so many years it's not been regulated, so people have become used to seeing things like, oh, eco-friendly or sustainably sourced, and nobody really knows what that means. And there's not been any strict rules or regulations around who can use that. I think now we're getting much more aware of the use or perhaps misuse of such claims, which is why it's good to see the CMA are investigating this, and it's making the news. So yeah, we'll see where it goes, what they find out.
And what do you think? Do you get a sense that, like, the consumer, do you get a sense that when it comes to kind of those vague claims that, for example, Unilever in this instance are being investigated for, do you think that we have a more informed customer base broadly that are kind of just not accepting of the use of those terms, which are ultimately, unclear? Or do you think it still requires that degree of influence and that degree of input from a regulator like the CMA in order to, I think, as they note, protect customers?
Yeah, I did see that they're protecting customers, and I do think there does need that, because even if someone can go into a shop and view something, see a row of products, subconsciously they might be led towards a certain product. I'm guessing a lot of the time it's price led for many people, but even then there might be two of the same price, and they might think, oh, well, that one's eco-friendly, or that one's called, its name or it's got coloring and it's got green leaves on it, that must be better for me and for planet. And that's not necessarily correct. So I think a lot of it goes into the psychology of what, there's color psychology that we're all influenced by. And without even knowing it, we'll just, you see reds and purples and you instantly think like Christmas, warm, cozy, those sorts of things. And you see light colors and you think spring and fresh and grass and, sustainability. And that's not always what the product is actually selling. So I do think that it's important to have a regulator like that. I feel perhaps it could be more more proactive in the approach, because I don't know, sometimes the damage has already been done and people have already been misled before they get there. Hopefully in time that will change.
And out of interest, so you talked there about the use of color and the use of imagery. Do you think there's almost I suppose, what are your thoughts upon like the degree, the ambiguity, I guess, that comes with the use of color and the use of imagery versus the use of copy? Like, when you're thinking as a marketeer between, the impact of misleading imagery and color versus misleading copy and messaging, like, is there a difference? Is there one that's more prevalent than the other? Do you think that, what's your take on that sort of two sides of the coin?
Well, it's interesting because when you go through a brand strategy or a brand planning or evolving any brand, you look at what the values are of that company first, and then you build the brand visuals after all the hard work you've done on what the values are. So you wouldn't choose colors, graphics, iconography, typography that doesn't match those values. And it's interesting what we perceive to match certain values. So in this case, whether it's, I don't know if it was Dove or whatever brand they were choosing, but they've obviously done work and thought, we want this to represent X. So we're going to choose this color, this typography, and then these words are going to reflect that. But that's not really the issue. It's more, is that truly, are all those values, colors, and imagery truly reflecting what's within the product and how it's being made? Because I think even when you look at individual brands for a company like Unilever, which is enormous, even if they were making an individual product that was sustainably sourced, had very responsible ways of being made, packaging, etc., if the overall operations of the bigger company in Unilever are not sustainable and they're doing, I don't know, things that are not in line with trying to get to net zero, then that's a problem as well. Because it's a similar thing where you have certain brands that say, oh, they're a vegan cosmetic brand, and yet all the other brands within their portfolio are not. And then you think, well, there's a conflict there. So it's the same with sustainability. Sorry, I went off on a little bit.
No. I no, that was brilliant. That was brilliant. No, I love that. When you look at kind of Unilever as because I think that's a really interesting point you make about the size and the spread, if you like, of Unilever, and how actually getting this stuff right, or understanding what would be a fair claim that they could make, that how far do you go back? Like, how far do you look into the relationships between, every player within their supply chain? And therefore, from a Unilever perspective, I'm not giving them a pass here, but it must be quite challenging to get to the point of being like, well, what can we? And obviously, they've noted in the research, in the article, that they're surprised by this, and they feel like they've got robust processes that will enable them to present that, yes, we have made these claims from a substantiated position. But it must be challenging for them. Do you have any empathy for them as an entity in that sense?
I mean, I imagine their operations are enormous. But I think that it comes down to then just being transparent about where you are at, rather than claiming that you are doing something or are planning to do something before you're actually done it. Be very transparent and open and honest about where you are in that process, because people will respond to that in a better way than, oh, we plan to do this by X, and then when you get to that date, oh, well, we haven't quite met that. That's only going to damage it. So I think it's all about the transparency. I imagine it will take them years to sort out their operations, and I have no idea about how they, or what they're doing in terms of their sustainability strategy, but it would be enormous. But if they're clear that this brand we're focusing on first, or this side of the business, or this location and this region, then people are much more aware of, oh, look, there's a plan in place and we're going to follow that. It might not go to plan, but at least this is what we're working towards, and these are the steps we've made so far, so we can say we've achieved this, we're aiming to do that, but we're not there yet. And I think it's just being very clear in the language you use, because language is so powerful and can be misinterpreted in so many ways when it comes to something like how sustainable you are or what you're doing to help solve the climate crisis. You can't be ambiguous about that.
This is a thinly veiled plug for the work that we're doing with the Anti-Greenwash Charter. But do you think, in a hypothetical scenario, thinking about the brand damage that has been done by this announcement, even before you look into kind of what comes of it, there's some serious brand damage that's been done here to Unilever just on the basis that the CMA have shared that they're looking into them. If Unilever, they mentioned that they've got this robust process for substantiating their claims, if that was openly available and reviewable in terms of what that process is, what impact do you think that would have, if any, on, I guess, the possibility of being viewed in a different light, even when the CMA are sort of coming after them in this sense?
Well, I think the way they handle it going forward will count for a lot, because companies do mess up. I mean, ultimately, they're made up of people, aren't they? And humans make mistakes. You'd like to think that in a company like Unilever, there would be so many checkpoints that mistakes would be harder to get to this point. However, they do happen, and how they handle it going forward, and they'll have a huge brand management department that will be handling all of this in their PR. But if they investigate it and they are seen to have, made the wrong claims, they can just own up to that. I saw a company the other day, I can't remember what company it was now, it was a glasses company, and they had claimed that they were going to be doing lots of things. They were quite naive. I think they were small in that when they made these claims, and then they just came out and they sort of said, with a big campaign, we effed up, basically. These were all our bad moves, and they'd showcased all of the bad moves that they made by saying they were going to achieve this, but really that wasn't ever going to be possible. So they just owned up to it and they said, we messed up. This is what we've done. We're really sorry, and we want to make it right. And this is what we're putting in place. To find out, I'll have to get the name of the company so you can put it in the notes.
Yeah, for listeners to check out. But it's really interesting you mentioned that. It's I want to get your take on a theme that we've been discussing internally and with other guests is this idea of, or this concept of vulnerability within a commercial context. Is what's your, because in many ways, there's a lot, isn't there, now that we look at from a personal perspective of, strength in vulnerability and an authenticity in vulnerability. Do you think that's applicable within a commercial context? Is that what you're referring to here?
I do, because I think this is a time where businesses are really going to have to take a look at themselves if they want to succeed as a business. And this is looking at it through one lens. To be a sustainable business, whether your goal is for net zero or whatever their sustainability strategy is, it's hard to go through, at Axter, we've been going through the B Corp process, and that has taken over a year to get all of our things. We're not a big organization, and we've had agency support, but it's really difficult to assess what you're currently doing, and then put in place actions to make things better. So you don't know where you are before can move forward, and that takes time. And I think there's no harm in explaining and being very clear and transparent about the difficulties that businesses face, as long as you can show that you're doing something positive towards getting to that good end result. And that's where the vulnerability comes in, because I don't think people expect every business to have it right. And if they say they are, then they're definitely lying. There's always better things to be done. Nobody can actually be net zero in the true sense of the word at the moment. It's all still including offsetting. But if we're just honest about it, showing vulnerability, and these are the difficulties we're currently facing. We're working on this, but at the moment it's really hard and we're finding it really challenging. So we're also looking at other areas where we can make positive changes. Then that's only going to appeal to people. People buy people, don't they? So if they see a personal emotion through a business, it's going to work both ways. It's going to make them feel more real and more approachable and appealing.
And presumably more trustworthy.
Definitely.
Which is, I guess, a key theme. Just touching upon you, I want to get your take on just slightly moving back to the Unilever case study. You mentioned there about, they're going to have this big brand and PR team who are going to be looking at, like, how do we manage this as best we possibly can. Do you see, obviously their initial reaction and response to the CMA's news that they're investigating them is that they were disappointed and surprised. I think surprised and disappointed that the CMA was taking the step and that they had this robust process. What do you see happening next in terms of the way that Unilever might look to kind of navigate these waters from a kind of a press perspective? Do you think there's a possibility that they'll go down the look, we're going to put our hands up here, we might have got some things wrong? Or do you think that there'll be more, no, we've got this process, it's robust, we're not going to tell you what it is, but we're substantiating our claims? And where do you think they'll end up fitting or sitting?
Oh, it's a hard one. I know where I'd like them, or what I'd like them to do if the CMA do find that they've been using misleading claims. I'd like them to own up to it and accept responsibility, and then really have a hard look at what they can do to make a positive change, because not saying anything is just as bad as or covering up rather things that you're not looking at is as bad as making claims of the things that you are trying to do and not doing as well, if that makes sense. So they call it green hushing, don't they? But I think part of it is perhaps they might think they haven't done anything wrong, and then it's an education piece around, well, like the work you're doing with the anti-greenwash charter, and there are other ways you can educate yourself, but all marketeers should be knowledgeable about how you talk about sustainability. And I know I've always been very cautious around not feeling like an expert in that area, because it's not my background. So I've drawn upon resource and people that I know and they know how to talk about what we're trying to do in a way that is truthful, fair, and really representing exactly where we're at in our journey. That doesn't need to be diminishing any brand, quite the opposite, to be honest, because they've made claims that perhaps aren't true that are now going to damage the brand and potential sales. Or maybe they took the risk and thought, we're big enough to be able to fight off any potential trouble that might come our way, which is now. So I don't know. I'd like them to own up to it if they are proved to be making misleading claims, but it could be a case of, we'll just remove that and carry on. Take away anything that, because a lot of people won't have even seen this and maybe won't ever know.
And out of interest, though, is there any sense that the damage, a significant amount of damage is already being done? So really, I guess, that what happens next is kind of, it'll obviously layer it on, and they want to kind of crisis manage it as best they possibly can. But essentially, just being what's the word? Just people suggesting that their claims are unsubstantiated and there's greenwashing occurring. That's a real problem for them anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's brought to the forefront what Greenpeace was saying, that they're nowhere near meeting their targets around reducing their single-use plastics. So that's then brought that back into the conversation, where people were thinking, oh, you know what? Actually, yeah, all of those bottles or all of those things, I thought they were recyclable, but they're obviously not. Or it does bring up other questions, and it just tarnishes the overall Unilever brand.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's Charlotte. That was really interesting getting your take on that. I want to move the conversation slightly towards now. And you mentioned the work at Axter that you guys are doing, but can you maybe just start by giving our listeners kind of a flavour of a little bit more background on Axter and the work that you're doing specifically on the sustainability kind of strategy piece?
Yeah, sure. So Axter are a manufacturer, but also supplier of flat roof waterproofing membranes and general waterproofing systems, which include solar PV, blue roofs, which attenuate water, so prevent open flooding, and then green roofs. So anything from a blanket sedum roof to a full garden on top of your roof. So that's what we do. And we sell predominantly specification based, so via architects to developers, but also we do a lot of refurbishment work as well. So that's what we do. Our sustainability journey really, I mean, I don't know when it really started, but it properly felt like it took off a few years ago, where we really committed to doing it properly. I think prior to that, and a lot of companies would do this, would sort of cling on to one or two things that they thought was sustainable element of the business and then would run with that. Consumers got more savvy, regulations got tougher, quite rightly so, especially within the built environment industry. So then it meant the requirements of what people were requesting, for businesses they could work in. So in our case, developers might be requesting higher level of sustainability or sustainably. They want to know basically what your sustainability strategy is, because they have to. It's sad but true. They have to tick a box in many ways, but it's good because that is the way that things move forward and people adhere to that. So in them doing that pushes then manufacturers to look at themselves, which then pushes the chain along. So we'd started a little bit before those regulations came in anyway, because we were passionate about it and we were committed to actually looking at ourselves. Okay, where are we currently at? Where are the bad things that we're doing? What are the good things that we're doing? How can we make things better? Where can we make changes? So we did a lot of research into our overall sustainability. So I think often people think of sustainability, they think how much carbon you're emitting. Obviously, that's a huge part of it. But in the bigger sense of the word, how we treat our people, what's our supply chain looking like? Are we creating a business that for the future? Are we trading fairly, etc., etc.? It's a huge thing, this environmental, social, and governance. And we found that the B Corp assessment felt to us like the most robust out there, and it just sort of resonated with us. So we decided to go along that path. And then alongside that, we also started to measure our carbon footprint, which was a big piece of work with agency. We brought in agencies to help us with this because we're only 50 people in our company. And obviously we didn't have that expertise in-house. So we've been working with a fantastic agency, female-led agency, Sid Connects, on our B Corp assessment, and they're now helping us build out a really robust sustainability strategy. And then we worked with 8 Versa, who have assisted us in measuring our carbon footprint, and have then put together a reduction plan for us, or proposed a reduction plan of how we can bring that down. So that's our journey so far. We're still in the queue for the B Corp assessment, so we haven't yet got our certification. We're hoping it might come. It was a bit complex in our case because we're a subsidiary that's owned by a bigger company. So we had to look into all of that, which was really refreshing, actually, because you then see they're looking into every element of the business. They're not just looking at our little subsidiary here. They're looking at, okay, but who owns that and where's that going and how do they operate? So that was refreshing to know that it was very thorough. Yes, so that's our journey so far.
It's awesome. There's so much to unpick there, Charlotte, but that was a brilliant synopsis. I want to go back to the beginning though of what you introduced there. You mentioned about the kind of the inspiration, I guess, behind Axter beginning to, as a company, really look at its sustainability more closely. And you talked about those kind of supply chain or sort of what's the word, tendering requirements, I guess, that you had to show certain things and to tick certain boxes. Was that the key and only driver, or was there something from your end as a marketeer, as the strategic thinker, if you like, within the organization, that thought, from a marketing perspective, we need to develop this side of things because that is something that is becoming more and more of a concern for our customer base, and it is something therefore that we need to get tight and right, that we can share and ultimately use to promote the business? What did that factor in?
Yes, I think it all factored in. The drive to do this ultimately came from within the company, with people who are passionate about making change and working for a business that is also committed to that. So that was a really big driver, and without that, we probably could have carried on not really looking at it and still making sales. But it was more, actually, no, we want to invest in this, not only for the possible benefits it might have from a marketing and communications perspective, but more so for how we want to operate, the type of business we want to be, and how we want to be setting the scene and for other businesses to perhaps follow suit. I think traditionally our industry, especially maybe the roofing sector, is a bit slower to pick up, than big consumer brands that you see, a bit slower to catch up with the sustainability side of things. And we kind of wanted to make sure that we were there doing it, flying the flag and saying, this is positive for everyone. There's no downside for doing this. Like there's only good things to come out of it. Doesn't matter where you are at currently. What matters is how you're going to go forward. So those were big drivers. Obviously, the specification requirements from developers and main contractors and so on, it kind of all happened at the same time. So it just helped, really.
And was that, like, when you say about, wanting to almost inspire the sector, I guess, in a way, to say, look, this can be done this way. What, besides, as we've kind of alluded, being, calling a spade, the commercial implications of that, and being kind of one of the leading lights, I guess, of adopting a sustainability ethos into what would traditionally be a sort of a traditional industry, if you like. What was the impact on, like, staff engagement and things like that from that perspective? Was that a key part of it as well, that actually you wanted Team Axter to feel like, guys, we're at the cutting edge of this, like we're adopting these fundamental principles into everything that we do, and we can be proud of that? Was that part of it too?
Yeah, I think we really noticed. So we did a campaign a few years ago called Roof Revolution, which is all about how you can use your roof space, or how you can revolutionize your roof space and make it more sustainable. And it had 5 core aims, which I can share with you. But it was basically showcasing all the different things you can put on your roof can help the health and well-being of the people who live there, can help attenuate water so that you prevent urban flooding. It can help grow vegetables, etc., etc. There was a few strands to it, and when we did that, it was aimed at being a externally focused campaign, obviously. But what we realized is that our people really bought into it and really felt passionate about these are the products that we're working on day in, day out. And actually, when you see them in a bigger picture of the impact they can have, people really felt like emotionally connected towards it. And then we realized, everyone wants to improve things. Everyone wants a better world to live in. So it wasn't necessarily because we thought we needed to improve engagement with our people, but we knew that we needed to do it because they expected that of us. I think that's more of it, the expectation of we should be doing this, especially when our products, like I said there, we've got blue roofs, solar PV and green roofs are a big part of our business. And they're the key areas which you can really sell, they say in the words, the vision of how we could create urban landscapes that are so much better for the planet and the people that live there. But if we're trying to sell that, we surely have to look at ourselves and our operations and how we work before we can be selling the dream of a sustainable world that we're going to live in. So it was kind of like hand in hand that, you know, we are selling these products and they have got amazing benefits, but we also need to make sure that the way those products are getting to market are responsible and is the best they can be at the moment. I'm not saying they're the best they should be, but at the moment, and then make sure we've got a plan to work towards to improve, get better and better.
And on that, specifically, when you were tasked with essentially developing the company's sustainability strategy, what impact was there in terms of having to kind of retrofit that into the company versus, obviously, if we were to start a roofing company together tomorrow, we could say, look, we're going to have these key foundational values at the heart of everything that we do, and every decision we make from conception and incorporation through to development of this business is going to relate to that. What was the experience of going, right, this is now a top-down requirement, but also it's a marketing requirement, but it's also an internal kind of expectation of employees requirement, everything we talked about. Like, what was it like trying to kind of retrofit sustainability into Axter?
Well, when so I have worked for Axter since about 2015, but I had a little break for when I had my children. So when I came back, we were at this tipping point of, okay, there's lots of things that want to happen, lots of things we want to do. This sustainability piece was a huge part of it. And then when I reviewed where the brand was currently sitting, it didn't quite gel. So that's when we went, okay, let's take a step back. Let's review exactly what we're all about, who we are, what our values are, because things change over time as well. The landscape changes, your business operations change, everything changes. So you have to take a look at your vision for the future and your values and how you're going to get there every few years, I'd say. So it was time for us to do that. So when we were reviewing that really helped guide us with the sustainability strategy, because we were kind of like, okay, this is what we want to do. This is our vision. So we defined our vision as to improve the roofscape and transform the world above our heads. Now that is bold, but it was really this drive to be committed towards doing what we can, not only from a commercial side of things, but to literally transform the world above our heads, because there's so much dead space up there. So it tied in perfectly with then us starting our B Corp journey, to be able to kind of put our money where our mouths are, really. And what we're saying we want to achieve, these are the actions that we're doing to get there. But we were very careful, and I was very conscious. I said, I'm not making any claims about our sustainability achievements until we've got something to say. And that doesn't mean we haven't mapped the journey that we've been on. So on our website, you can see like the dates where we've started. We started talking with our sustainability consultants. Then we did this. Then we learned about that. Like we've mapped it out with the end goal being, and this is where we're at, and this is where our plan is and our roadmap for the next 3 years. So it wasn't so much like retrofitting. It kind of happened at a similar time. It was more, let's review our brand, our business, where we want to be compared to where we currently are. And then sustainability was such a huge part of that. It became very apparent of how we needed to get to where we want to be.
And fascinating to hear you say that you made the commitment as the kind of senior marketer within the business to say, look, we will not share any sustainability related achievements until ultimately we have something to share. I think that was pretty much what you said. Out of interest, what talk us through the kind of criteria, if you like, or the decision-making process for when does something kind of mature to the point where you would feel comfortable sharing it or incorporating it as part of your marketing?
Well, I think it's just the language that you decide to use. So, this is an extreme example, but we can show that we're working on our B impact assessment, which is the B Corp assessment, but we can't say that we've already got it. Just because we've done the assessment doesn't mean that we have achieved that status. So you can share what you're doing without implying that you've already done it, if that makes sense. And it wasn't ever like we're going to hold anything back. It was very much like, we're in the process of measuring our carbon scope 1, 2, and 3. This has been a really long, intense process. We're working on this, but we want to make sure that we've got absolutely everything covered as fully as we possibly can to get an accurate figure at the end of it. So there weren't any strict decisions on what we could and couldn't share. It was more, let's just be very open and honest about it, because ultimately that's what we're doing. There's nothing to hide. We're not doing anything bad. We're not, if anything, we're just doing what we feel we need to do to help our business, the people who work here, the people who live in and around what we do, the people who are impacted by the products that we sell. We just want to try and make it better in the capacity that we can currently.
And since kind of that was beautiful. Honestly, that was so beautifully presented. I will definitely, capture and use that. No, it was lovely. It was so well positioned. In terms of since you've set this sort of vision, if you like, from a sustainability perspective for the company, and you've shared these initiatives and these activities that you're undertaking, what's been the implication from a marketing perspective or a comms perspective, both sort of internally and externally? Like, how is that message and that journey that you guys are going on, how's that been received?
It's been received really positively, because we've purposely decided to do something quite different to other competitors. The way we brand ourselves, the way we communicate is hopefully seen as refreshing. We're not the quickest. We're smaller than a lot of our competitors, so we're not always the quickest or the first to do things. But hopefully the way that we choose to do things, the way we display it, and the elements that we decide to focus our energy, time and money on are ones that people resonate with. And we're really trying hard. Our communications strategy incorporates a lot of, I don't like just saying sustainable solutions, because that's a very broad statement and vague, as a vague claim. But we talk a lot about things that are happening just in the world, and things that we want to showcase and work towards, and best practices really throughout the industry that should be done more. Like, we wish that every roof that we were specified to do would include some form of green, blue, solar. And it's not, and we don't always have the power to influence that, because it ultimately comes from the client specifying them. What we do have is the power to discuss and showcase the possibilities and what that might do in terms of the end result of their consumers buying their flats or the properties that they're building. It doesn't always have the sway. So we feel if we can spread the word more so about the benefits of these green roofs, having solar PV, then consumers will be more aware of it. And ultimately, if a consumer is wanting something, eventually it works its way up, and then the producers or the developers in this case, will realize that that's a necessity. I think a lot of the time, though, in the built environment, it comes from legislation and the fact that you have to have certain sustainable elements to your building. The roof is the perfect place to do that. So
fascinating. That is really, in terms of, there are two things there, aren't there? There's obviously most of the conversation that we've had has been talking about the kind of the vehicle, if you like, delivering these messages, i.e., Axter as a company, its sustainability credentials, essentially. But then what you're talking about here is actually then the presentation and promotion of the sustainability impact or solutions, as you alluded to, that the products themselves offer. And that's almost another side of the coin, really.
Yeah, and we wanted it to be woven in very organically and just real, like not be with too much of an agenda, for it to be something that we're truly passionate about and that we feel can have such a big impact on cityscapes in particular. Like it would just be incredible if you looked across London and every flat roof had some form of green area, or was attenuating water, or was generating power. There's amazing things you can do. Yes, at the moment the cost is probably a little bit higher, but the benefits to it would far outweigh that.
And does that form part of, this might be a bit of a leading question with another hat on here, but is that part of your kind of overall like marketing strategy to kind of share that vision and to promote that vision of what could be, what the future could look like if this stuff was adopted?
Oh, 100%. That's our main goal with our communications and our marketing, is to really showcase what you can put on a roof, and to revolutionize that roof space, to make it the norm. And I always think I'd really love as short a time as possible, but in like 5 years' time, for it to be not just, okay, so we've got a roof, obviously it's going to be waterproofed, obviously it's going to have good insulation, and it's going to keep people safe from the elements. They're the basics. But then what's the purpose of this flat roof space? What are we going to use it for? For that to be the key question. It's not at the moment, sadly. I mean, some cases it is, and you can do incredible things. You can put greenhouses on the roof. I think there was a report that said something like if 5% of all the roofs flat roofs in London were used to grow vegetables, you'd feed the entire population of London with fresh fruit and vegetables. And you're like, it's a no-brainer. So wow. I would love for the messages that we're trying to drip out and to try and encourage people to just be, even if they're seeing something and then they read it, the next time it takes a few times for something to properly sink in. But if they're getting that message continually, then specifiers might then think, oh, this is a great building. Like on this, we could do this. And the benefits to that would be X, Y, Z to the community, or for wildlife, for fresh produce. So 100% that is our strategy. Yes.
Absolutely sold. I love that. That's an absolute headline regarding the feeding of London. It's fantastic.
I'd need to get the stats right on that though. I'm sure it's about 5%, but I have to check.
Clear, as per this podcast, we will definitely be checking to make sure we've got those numbers right. Charlotte, that was really, really interesting. We've got 5 minutes left of the conversation. I want to slightly change tack here. As somebody with your level of experience and knowledge, I guess, as a marketer, as a senior communications professional, really interested in getting your kind of key bit of advice that you would offer to your younger self or a junior marketer out there when it comes to responsible marketing and how to approach things in the right way. Could you maybe share with us your number one bit of advice?
Well, I think it always comes down, for me, especially now, knowing what your personal values are and knowing when something's wrong and not being afraid to kind of call it out. It goes back to that the trust element. You have to have that within yourself and have to feel passionate and know that what you're communicating is the truth. I physically can't communicate anything or put a message out there that I don't 100% believe is exactly what we're doing. So I would just say to any young people starting, feel confident in your own values, and just always go with that. As soon as you go against your values and what doesn't feel right, there's never a good outcome. And don't be afraid to just question it. You can do it in a friendly way, but ask to see the evidence if you are unsure, and come up with an idea of how better to communicate a message that's going to be forward. So yeah, be like, know your values and stick to them, and the trust element of what you're saying, make sure it's the truth.
Absolutely brilliant. Love that. No, I love that. Definitely. Oh, a key thing to know. Yeah, know your values and stick to them. Fantastic, Charlotte. That was a delight. Thank you so much
Oh, it's
for
been really
taking the
fun.
time to talk it through. Guys, I'll just finish off by saying, as with our other episodes, you'll find links to all the relevant things that Charlotte and I have discussed in the description and in the accompanying article. Charlotte, thanks again for joining me,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.